How far would someone go to destroy the happiness of someone they once called their best friend? Amara sat slumped on the edge of her couch, her body bruised, her clothes disheveled, and her mind trapped in a fog of confusion. The sunlight creeping through the curtains felt invasive, harsh against her battered reality. Her fiancé, Idris, stood a few feet away, his phone gripped tightly in his hand, his expression a volatile mix of anger and disbelief. "I saw the video," he said, his voice hard and distant. Amara looked up slowly, her eyes red and unfocused. "What video?" she whispered, her voice cracking under the strain of the moment. Idris's jaw tightened as he thrust the phone toward her. The screen illuminated a scene so shocking, Amara instinctively recoiled before fully comprehending it. It was her, vulnerable, exposed, and in a situation she couldn't explain. Her heart raced as her mind struggled to fill in the blanks of the night before. Her lips trembled as she began to speak, but nothing coherent came out. Instead, her hands instinctively wrapped around herself, as though trying to shield what little remained of her dignity. "Why, Amara? Why would you do this?" Idris demanded, his voice sharp with pain. But as he stepped closer, his eyes caught something he hadn't noticed before, the bruises on her arms, the dried blood on her knees, and the way she winced with every breath. Amara barely managed to whisper, "I don't remember. I don't know what happened. Please, just take me to the hospital." Idris hesitated, his anger briefly eclipsed by concern. Without another word, he grabbed a blanket, gently draped it over her, and helped her to her feet. The ride to the hospital was heavy with silence, each of them lost in a whirlwind of questions and doubts. At the hospital, as the doctor's examination began, the gravity of what had happened started to come into focus. Words like assault and rape filled the sterile room, slicing through the air like knives. Idris sat in the corner, his head in his hands, the weight of the video still pressing down on him. But then, a thought struck him, something about the video didn't add up. Why were the faces of the men obscured? And more importantly, who was behind the camera? And so, a chilling realization began to creep over him. The betrayal wasn't just a random act of violence. It was personal, calculated, and deliberate. What happens when envy turns into a weapon, and the bond of sisterhood becomes the perfect tool for destruction? Amara radiated warmth. She was the type of woman who could walk into a room and instantly light it up with her smile. Charismatic and kind-hearted, she drew people to her effortlessly, a natural magnet for admiration and friendship. A devoted Christian, Amara believed in giving without expecting anything in return, a trait that only deepened the love people felt for her. She was generous to a fault, always the one to organize surprise birthday parties, show up at a friend's door with a home-cooked meal, or lend an ear during someone's darkest days. To those who knew her, she was more than a friend, she was a sister, a confidant, and a source of unshakable support. When she met Idris, a charming and ambitious entrepreneur, her life felt complete. Idris was everything she had prayed for, devoted, respectful, and attentive. Their love story was one for the ages. They met at a charity gala, where Amara's infectious laughter caught Idris's attention from across the room. Over time, what began as casual conversations grew into a bond neither could ignore. Their relationship blossomed with a sense of ease. Idris admired Amara's selflessness, while she was drawn to his unwavering ambition and steady demeanor. Together, they envisioned a future filled with joy, laughter, and family. Samara, a Muslim lady, had always been the quiet one. Reserved and introspective, she preferred observing the world to participating in its chaos. Unlike Amara, who seemed to attract people effortlessly, Samara struggled to find her place. As a child, she often felt overlooked, especially when standing beside Amara's shining light. Growing up, Samara's admiration for Amara often blurred into envy. There was a time when they were just two little girls, inseparable and full of dreams. But as they grew older, the cracks began to show. Samara noticed how effortlessly things seemed to come to Amara, the friends, the opportunities, the admiration. She tried to suppress the bitterness, but it lingered, gnawing at her every time she saw Amara succeed. Samara's life took a harsher turn when she fell in love with a man who promised her the world but abandoned her when she became pregnant. Left to raise her son alone, she faced the harsh reality of single motherhood. It was Amara who stood by her side, offering emotional and financial support. But instead of gratitude, Samara found herself resenting Amara even more. Why did she always have to be the savior? Why was her life always so picture-perfect while Samara's was a constant struggle? The resentment festered quietly, unnoticed by anyone except for Samara herself. On the surface, she continued to play the role of the loyal friend. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that Amara's happiness came at her expense. Their friendship had its roots in childhood, filled with moments of pure joy, shared secrets, laughter, and dreams of the future. Amara was always the planner, the dreamer, while Samara preferred to follow, finding comfort in Amara's leadership. Amara never wavered in her support for Samara. She was there through every heartbreak, every disappointment. She saw the quiet pain in her friend's eyes and did everything she could to lighten her load. But Samara's feelings toward Amara were far more complicated. She admired her friend's strength and generosity but couldn't ignore the bitterness that simmered beneath the surface. Samara's internal conflict grew as the years went on. She loved Amara as a friend but secretly despised how Amara always seemed to have the upper hand. It wasn't that Amara flaunted her success, quite the opposite. But for Samara, every act of kindness from Amara felt like a reminder of her own shortcomings. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that seemed to reflect Amara's joy as she welcomed a small group of friends into her home. The smell of freshly baked pastries filled the air, and the room buzzed with light-hearted conversation. Among the guests was Samara, seated in the corner, her smile faint but present. She watched as Amara, glowing with happiness, introduced her fiancé, Idris. "Everyone, this is Idris," Amara said with a laugh, gripping his arm proudly. "The man who's made me the happiest woman alive." The room erupted in applause and cheers, but Samara's clapping was slow, mechanical. She forced a smile, hoping no one noticed the tightness in her jaw. Idris was everything Amara had described, handsome, confident, and undeniably charming. As he greeted everyone, his warmth was infectious, drawing people in just as Amara always had. Samara's stomach churned. She avoided Idris's gaze, focusing instead on her drink. When Amara turned her attention elsewhere, Samara changed the subject abruptly, steering the conversation away from the couple. But the unease lingered. That evening, back in the solitude of her room, Samara couldn't stop thinking about him. She opened her phone and typed his name into the search bar, scrolling through his social media. Pictures of Idris and Amara stared back at her, each post a testament to their love. The captions were filled with words like forever and soulmate. The more she scrolled, the tighter the knot in her chest grew. Her mind raced. Why does she always get everything? The friends, the admiration, and now this perfect man. What does she have that I don't? The bitterness was no longer subtle, it was alive, clawing at her from within. The days that followed saw Samara venturing into dangerous territory. She started liking Idris's posts, then commenting, at first innocuous things like "great photo" or "congratulations." But soon, her messages became more direct. She sent him a private message one evening, pretending to ask about an event Amara had mentioned. "Hey Idris, quick question," she began casually. "Amara said you're into investment strategies. I could really use some advice." Idris, polite as always, responded briefly, offering general suggestions. But Samara saw it as an opening. Over the next few weeks, she sent more messages, often late at night. She tested boundaries, slipping in compliments about his intelligence and ambition. At first, Idris dismissed it, seeing her as nothing more than Amara's friend. But as her messages grew increasingly personal, he became uneasy. One night, she sent him a text that made him pause. "You deserve someone who really sees you. Someone who appreciates you for more than just what you can offer." Idris knew exactly what she was implying. He didn't respond, but the seed of discomfort had been planted. He wanted to tell Amara but hesitated, knowing how much she valued her friendship with Samara. I don't want to come between them, he thought. Maybe if I just ignore it, she'll stop. But Samara didn't stop. Her obsession only deepened. She began imagining scenarios where Idris would leave Amara for her. She convinced herself that if he just saw Amara for who she really was, he'd realize she was the better choice. Her resentment transformed into a fixation. Every smile Idris shared with Amara, every public declaration of love, felt like a personal insult. In the quiet moments of her mind, Samara whispered to herself, "She doesn't deserve this. Not this time." Samara sat at her desk, scrolling through pictures of Amara and Idris, her resentment simmering just beneath the surface. Their smiles, their perfectly crafted captions, everything about them screamed untouchable happiness. And she hated it. She started small, slipping subtle remarks to Idris whenever she had the chance. "Amara's been so busy lately," she'd say, feigning concern. "I hope she's making enough time for you." Or, "She's lucky to have you, someone so patient with her moods." But Idris wasn't easily swayed. If anything, Samara's attempts to create cracks in their relationship only made him more steadfast. "Amara's incredible," he'd reply with a warm smile. "I'm lucky to have her." Samara's frustration grew. She tried planting doubts directly with Amara, suggesting Idris might be distracted or distant. But Amara dismissed it, brushing off Samara's comments with her usual optimism. It was maddening. Every effort to tarnish their relationship only seemed to strengthen it. Then came the moment that pushed Samara to the edge, their engagement announcement. Amara showed up at Samara's door, her smile radiant, her hand extended to display the sparkling ring. Samara forced a smile, her heart pounding with anger. Inside, one thought looped through her mind. If I can't have him, I'll make sure she doesn't either. 3 days before the wedding, Samara called Amara with an idea. "Let's go out," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "One last night to celebrate before you leave us all behind for married life." Amara hesitated. She wasn't much of a drinker, and the chaos of a night out didn't appeal to her, especially so close to the wedding. But Samara was insistent, and Amara, ever trusting of her friend, relented. "Okay," she said with a laugh. "Let's do it. Just promise me you won't let me get too crazy." What Amara didn't know was that Samara had been planning this night for weeks. She had hired a group of men, ensuring they wouldn't reveal their identities. She rehearsed every detail, from how she'd spike Amara's drink to the lies she'd tell afterward. When the night arrived, Samara dressed to perfection, masking her true intentions behind a wide smile and enthusiastic energy. As they walked into the club, Samara leaned in close. "Tonight's all about you, sis," she said. "Let's make it unforgettable." Inside, the music pounded, and the lights flashed in dizzying patterns. Samara handed Amara drink after drink, insisting, "It's just one night, live a little." At first, Amara resisted, but eventually, she relented, laughing as she sipped on cocktails. Samara kept a watchful eye, her heart racing with anticipation as she saw Amara's defenses begin to fall. Samara's energy was electric as she danced beside Amara, who was now laughing and swaying to the music. To anyone watching, they looked like two best friends celebrating a milestone. But every move Samara made was calculated. When the time was right, Samara guided Amara toward the exit, feigning concern. "You look tired," she said. "Let me get you a cab." Amara, her head spinning, nodded weakly. She leaned on Samara for support as they made their way outside. What Amara didn't see were the shadows waiting nearby, the men Samara had hired. The next morning, Amara woke up in her own bed, her body aching, her clothes gone. Her mind was blank, unable to recall anything beyond flashes of the night before. The bruises on her arms and legs sent a chill through her. Panicked, she called Samara. "What happened last night?" she asked, her voice shaking. "How did I get home?" Samara's voice was calm, almost too calm. "We left the club together," she said. "But then we got separate cabs." "You don't remember?" Amara clutched the phone tighter. "I don't remember anything." I feel like something happened. Samara let out a soft laugh, dismissing her concerns. You probably just drank too much. Rest up, you'll be fine by tomorrow. But Amara wasn't fine. As she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the bruises that marked her body, an unsettling realization began to take hold. Something had happened, and Samara wasn't telling the whole truth. And deep down, Amara knew that the person she had always trusted the most was somehow at the center of it all. Idris sat at his desk, scrolling through his messages, his phone pinging with an anonymous notification. He opened it, his brow furrowing as he saw a video attached. Curiosity turned to horror as he played it. The grainy footage showed Amara, barely conscious, her body vulnerable and exposed, surrounded by shadowy figures. His chest tightened, his mind racing with disbelief. The caption read, "This is what she does when you're not around." Anger surged through him. This couldn't be real. Not Amara. But the images on the screen were undeniable. His thoughts spiraled as he grabbed his car keys and drove straight to her house, the video playing over and over in his mind. Bursting into her apartment, Idris found Amara slumped on the couch, her face pale, her body weak. She looked up at him, confused by his sudden arrival. "Idris," she whispered. "I saw the video," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. Amara blinked, her brow furrowing. "What video?" "The one of you with other men," he said, shoving the phone in her direction. "How could you do this?" She stared at the screen, her heart sinking as the images played. Her breath caught in her throat, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at him. I don't know what this is. Idris, I swear I don't remember." He stepped back, his frustration evident, but something about her frailty made him hesitate. She was trembling, her eyes pleading. Then he noticed the bruises on her arms and legs, the way she winced with every movement. "Amara," he said, his voice softening, "what happened to you?" "I don't know," she said through sobs. "But please, take me to the hospital." The drive to the hospital was filled with silence, the weight of unspoken questions pressing down on both of them. Idris kept glancing at Amara, his mind conflicted between anger and concern. At the hospital, the doctors took Amara in for examination, leaving Idris alone in the waiting room. He stared at his phone, the video playing again. Something about it didn't sit right. The faces of the men were obscured, as though intentionally hidden. And then there was the camera angle, who had filmed it? When the doctor returned, her expression was grim. "She's been raped," the doctor said. "Her injuries confirm it." The words hit Idris like a blow. His grip on the phone tightened as he looked back at the video. Could Amara have been set up? And if so, who would do such a thing? He walked into Amara's room, his anger tempered by a growing sense of doubt. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with pain. "Do you believe me now?" she whispered. "I don't know what to believe," he admitted, sitting beside her. "But I know this isn't adding up. We need to figure out who's behind this." The next morning, as Amara rested, her phone buzzed on the bedside table. It was Samara. Weakly, Amara picked up the call. "Amara." Samara's voice was filled with faux concern. "Are you okay? I've been so worried." Amara hesitated, her exhaustion weighing heavily on her. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Did Idris cancel the wedding?" Samara asked suddenly. Her tone was casual, but the question sent a chill down Amara's spine. "What?" Amara said, sitting up slightly. "Why would he cancel the wedding?" "Well, after the video, Samara trailed off, realizing her mistake. Amara froze. "What video?" Samara stammered, trying to recover. I heard about it. I assumed he showed you." But the damage was done. Amara's mind raced. She hadn't told Samara about the video, and Idris hadn't mentioned sharing it with anyone. When Idris returned to the room, Amara relayed the conversation. His eyes darkened as the pieces began to fit together. "She knows about the video?" he asked. "Yes," Amara said, her voice firm. "And I never told her." Without hesitation, Idris reported the situation to the police, sharing the video and Samara's suspicious knowledge of it. The investigation began, and the cracks in Samara's facade would soon become impossible to hide. The investigation began quietly but meticulously. When Idris handed over the video and shared his suspicions about Samara, the police wasted no time combing through every detail. Their first step was to review security footage from the club and surrounding streets on the night in question. Hours of grainy video revealed a crucial moment, Samara helping Amara into her home. She supported her friend, who appeared disoriented and barely able to stand. The footage directly contradicted Samara's earlier claim that they had left the club in separate cabs. This discrepancy became the first crack in Samara's story. When questioned, her initial calm demeanor faltered. "I don't remember much," she said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We both had a lot to drink, and I called for separate cabs. That's all." But the detectives weren't convinced. "If you left in separate cabs," one officer said, sliding a still image from the security footage across the table, "then why were you the one walking Amara into her home?" Samara's face flushed. She stammered, searching for an explanation. I must have forgotten," she said weakly. As the questioning continued, Samara's carefully crafted story began to unravel. Her answers grew more inconsistent, her nervousness more pronounced. When asked if she knew about the video, she denied it, only for her phone records to show a series of anonymous messages sent to Idris, leading investigators to connect her to the footage. With each new piece of evidence, the noose tightened around Samara. The day of Samara's arrest was quiet and unassuming. She was at home when officers arrived, their knock on the door echoing through her small apartment. She opened it, her face a mixture of confusion and fear. "Samara Body," one officer said, holding out a warrant. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit sexual assault and defamation." As the cuffs clicked around her wrists, Samara's expression shifted from shock to resignation. The weight of her actions had finally caught up with her. The trial that followed was a storm of emotions. Amara sat in the front row of the courtroom, flanked by Idris and her family, her face pale but composed. When the men Samara had hired were called to testify, the full extent of the betrayal came to light. "She paid us," one of them said bluntly. "Told us to make sure her friend couldn't remember anything and to leave right after." The courtroom gasped as each detail emerged, the planning, the execution, and the chilling level of calculation involved. Amara's testimony was raw and powerful. She recounted the trust she had placed in Samara, the betrayal she never saw coming, and the trauma that continued to haunt her. Tears streamed down her face as she looked directly at Samara. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why would you do this to me?" Idris also took the stand, his voice steady but filled with barely concealed anger. "I trusted you," he said, glaring at Samara. "Amara trusted you. And you destroyed everything." Samara remained stoic throughout the trial, her expression unreadable. But when the judge handed down her sentence, a lengthy prison term for her role in orchestrating the assault, her composure finally broke. The sound of her sobs filled the courtroom as the judge spoke of the tragic destruction of a decades-long friendship. "This was not just a crime against Amara," the judge said sternly. "It was a crime against trust, against humanity. You turned envy into violence, and now you must face the consequences." Samara was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years. As Samara was led away in cuffs, Amara and Idris sat together, holding hands. The bond between them had been tested but not broken. For Samara, the sentence marked the end of a long journey of resentment and obsession. But for Amara, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by betrayal, but by resilience and love. Amara's journey to recovery was long and arduous. The physical wounds healed faster than the emotional scars, but neither process was easy. There were nights she woke up trembling, her mind haunted by flashes of that night. the betrayal of someone she had considered her sister weighed heavily on her, creating a pain deeper than the assault itself. Idris stood by her side through it all. He became her anchor, holding her when the nightmares came, listening when she needed to talk, and offering silence when the words were too heavy to form. Their wedding, originally planned to be a grand celebration, was postponed as they focused on Amara's healing. Months later, when the time felt right, they exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony with only close family and friends present. Amara walked down the aisle with tears in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of gratitude. Despite everything, love and trust had survived. Meanwhile, Samara faced the stark reality of her choices behind prison walls. The friendships she once had were gone, her family distanced, and her child left to be raised by relatives. Her envy and bitterness had not only destroyed Amara's trust but also her own future. In the confines of her cell, Samara had time to reflect. She replayed her actions over and over, unable to escape the weight of her guilt. Letters to her child went unanswered, and visits were rare. The isolation she felt was the consequence of a life spent comparing herself to others, rather than embracing her own worth. Her story became a cautionary tale within her community, a reminder of how jealousy can spiral into destruction, leaving nothing but regret in its wake. Amara's story isn't just about betrayal, it's about resilience. It's about how trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only with time, love, and effort. It's about the dangers of harboring envy and the destructive paths it can lead to if left unchecked. Can betrayal ever truly be forgiven? If you were in Amara's shoes, would you be able to move forward? If you were Idris, would you have been able to stand by her side? These are not easy questions, but they remind us of the fragility of human relationships and the importance of choosing our inner circle wisely. This story began as a tale of friendship, a bond that seemed unbreakable. But as we've seen, even the strongest bonds can crumble when jealousy and bitterness take root. From Amara's unwavering kindness to Samara's hidden envy, each chapter of their lives serves as a reminder of how choices define us. Amara chose forgiveness and healing. Samara chose resentment and destruction. The key turning points, the engagement announcement, the betrayal, the revelation of the video, and the trial, illustrate how envy can grow unnoticed and wreak havoc if left unchecked. And so, we end with this reflection. Sometimes, the greatest threats come from those closest to us. Choose your friends wisely, and guard your heart against envy, it destroys more than it creates. If you found this story thought-provoking, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that challenge and inspire reflection.